No countdown today, Santi. It's a post game Fallout. We're live on wherever we're streaming this, uh, and it's just. I mean, what can you do after this one? What's the knee jerk reaction before we even start the pod recording?
Well, not a good game. It was hard to pick the man of the match because I
See,
don't really.
I found it easy to pick the man of the match on the
Well,
city
Ben
side.
Lund.
Ben Lund, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I also thought there was no other option besides Ben
Mm-hmm.
Lund, like that,
Yeah.
which is probably the most frustrating thing is you can't have your keeper be your best and only option for man of the match. Yeah, so uh it's it's just sad. I mean, this was just a really pitiful performance from everything that we had projected. I'm gonna get my really, really big frustrations out before we even start the pod because uh it was I can't wait to see. And we're recording this well before we get our 3-word responses. I'm excited to see what the chat has to say because um, I there's so many problems with this match. Like Dustin Zerbriggen in the chat immediately fire that ref.
Yeah.
I I mean, you could argue that he wasn't being even keeled. It wasn't being fair in the distribution like between the two teams as far as propensity to give yellows or especially the second yellow where it didn't seem like. But I think I heard from Ben Lunt post game or maybe it was Olaf or Ben Lunt that they didn't think the ref realized Edu was on a yellow already.
Yeah, and I could tell like when he showed him the yellow card, and immediately I thought, oh, he already has one, but I think the ref didn't realize that, and at that point, what can you
And
do?
it took him forever to pull out to pull out the red. Like it wasn't a traditional second yellow where he came locked and loaded, ready to do it. It was
Mm-hmm.
so we'll talk about that during the pod for sure. But yeah, thanks for joining us post game. We don't usually do a Fallout post game, but circumstances. If you're tuning into our live stream, we haven't yet started the pod recording. Behind the scenes, I am definitely not in my normal location. I'm absolutely
That way,
recording.
that looks normal, pretty normal, no?
Yeah, the normal backdrop I usually have. Yeah, CGI, totally CGI. This is normal. In a dark, secluded room, which is maybe the trunk of a car somewhere in Golden, Colorado. As I as I just need an outlet to talk about this performance that we saw, but I don't have that opportunity because I've got a hotel room with 2 kids and a wife with one room and it's bedtime, and there's no business center at this hotel, so I'm feeling the pain just as much as City fans are feeling the pain as well. Um, you want to get going on this? Like the show notes are going to be just really wild because we're
Yeah.
gonna this is gonna. I don't think anybody really wants a traditional Fallout. They just want to event. I bet if I were to guess, right? You think
Yeah,
so?
yeah. Let's do it. Make it a quick one. Not a lot to talk about, but let's do it.
Unfortunately, unfortunately. Uh, okay. Let's see. All right, here we go. Yeah, seriously. I don't know. Hopefully, nobody's going to jump out of the dark in this parking lot because it seems safe. The car's locked. I'm safe.
All right.
Let's do it. Welcome in, everyone, to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined as always by my friend in soccer, Santiago Beltran, for another Fallout. And it's not an exciting Fallout. We're just going to get that out of the way. But we're here nonetheless to recap a 1-0 St. Louis City defeat at the hands of the Philadelphia Union. And it is one of the most frustrating losses that I can recall having in quite some time, probably dating back to last season. Obviously, it's our first loss of this year. The clean sheet streak is now broken. We ended that streak, third all time in MLS for teams starting a season with a clean streak. Didn't quite make it to either Vancouver or New York Red Bulls, but here we are. It was there may be a bright spot that we can get to in a moment. Santi, you just came off the call because we're doing this Fallout. If you're listening to us on the podcast, we're doing this Fallout unusually post game right after the match. So we're getting knee-jerk reactions here. We're getting fan feedback right after the match, which is a benefit from an early kick, I suppose. People are still a little more awake, a little more fired up, and there's a lot of frustration going on. But Santi, you were on the call for the Spanish broadcast. How you doing post-game? And yeah, what's some knee-jerk reactions you got?
Doing all right. Definitely a frustrating way to lose a game. The first loss of the season was gonna come at some point, but it's just frustrating the way it happened. And yeah, you can talk about a lot of factors: the wind, the condition of the field, the ref. But at the end of the day, I don't think City did their job tonight. It was a frustrating performance. And yeah, the wind was a factor, but I don't think City understood that instead of playing long balls and putting the ball on the air, they needed to put the ball on the ground, which worked at times when City
Hmm.
broke Philadelphia's press, and in 2 3 touches they were close to the box and created some danger. But um, the team will learn from this. Again, that loss was going to come at some point, but it's also frustrating that it was against Bradley Carnell coach team.
Oh, absolutely. Let's take it back before we get into all the takeaways and the storylines as they evolved. Let's go back to the starting 11 like we usually do. And there weren't very many surprises to the starting 11, for better or for worse. You could argue for worse as it turned out, but we had Ben Lunt in net, taking over for Roman Berkey, who's still out with a fracture on his left hand. Giannis Horn, Henry Kessler, and Kyle Hebert made up the three center backs. Conrad Wallem was in at left wing back. Akil Watts was in at right wing back for Thomas Totland, who is out for a month with a pulled hamstring. Edu Leuven and Chris Durkin were our central midfielders. Marcel Hartl was our center attacking mid, and our forwards were Simon Betcher and Cedric Twyshert. Now, overall, I don't think there was any problem with this starting 11. It was one of the stronger 11s. And because of the depth we have, you can have questions in a couple different spots, namely Klaus at forward, also center backs. But this was what we expected on flyover. We expected Akil Watts to be slotted in at that right wing back spot because it doesn't disrupt anything else on the back line. Uh, Santi, I think it has to be said right from the get-go that St. Louis did not allow a goal in the run of play. Of the myriad of problems we had, that was one of the two bright spots that I think I could point to. That and Ben Lunt's 8 save performance in this game. When you saw this starting 11, and what did you think when you saw the 11, and what were some of your bigger thoughts when it comes to the 11?
Yeah, so the main thing was not Klaus on the starting 11. We had Klaus on our projected 11, and
Yeah.
I was surprised. It's the second time he second consecutive time that he doesn't start, which tells me that maybe Melberg is more inclined to play better. Could be also one of those things that depends on who the opponent is. He will use Klaus or use Becher, but for now, Becher getting more minutes didn't make a difference tonight. Even when Klaus came in, he had one play that was really good, but his cross wasn't good. It was like the team of the night that the team didn't understand putting the ball of the ground on the ground was the way to go. And when he tried that cross, he went on the air and it couldn't find the guys that were coming on the run of play. But yeah, just that starts the debate. Klaus, Becher, and what the strategy was. But the rest of the guys, that was the team that we predicted, and just moving Akil was to the right wing back was the way to go. Melberg had mentioned during the week that there were center backs that could play there, even Wallem. But in the end, the
Mm-hmm.
easy move was Akil Watts. But just even with that slight move, the team never found itself in the field in Philadelphia. And yeah, the wind was a big factor, but it played both ways. And on the second half, you could tell that Philadelphia managed it better. So, and I think the team knew that there was going to be wind and that could be a factor, but I just think the team handled it the best way.
Wind was a giant factor, especially for a team that couldn't get the ball out of their back end except for trying to send it long. And the gusts we heard were around 40 miles an hour. And so this ball was
Hmm.
going every which way except the way you wanted it to go.
Yeah.
But and that was mentioned by Olaf, and I think Ben Lunt also post game, the conditions of the pitch and the wind and the weather and all of that. But at the end of the day, if if you're relying on the long ball as the only way you can progress the ball, and you're playing it to Betcher and to Toyshirt, and you don't have Klaus, who I wouldn't call him an aerial duel specialist, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, you don't have that big body who is used to winning those duels and holding up the ball for others. It didn't seem like that was their intent, because each time the ball was played long, it came from a center back or Ben Lunt, and it didn't come from a winger who was trying to find space for a cutting forward or cutting attacking midfielder. And post game, I'll say this right off the bat: Olaf Melberg did have some comments post game about the way that the players started, the team not doing what they talked about doing at the beginning, before the game rather, and noted that in the first 10 or 15 minutes, especially, Olaf said they were playing it back to Ben or playing it back to the center backs when they were in control of possession. And if you're doing that, you're losing the midfield battle, first of all, but also you're giving up the opportunity at quality possession if you know you're going to have to send it long in the wind. So I'm not quite sure what the tactical perspective was on the ground, because the players on the wing and in the midfield seemed lost, especially at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, I think it was also a result of what Philadelphia was doing, but this is something St. Louis was expecting anyway. Like Philadelphia with the high press, 4 or 5 guys going at it and not giving the defense a space to go with some touches right of the back, and I think the guys felt uncomfortable and just playing it back to the center backs who would just try to clear the ball, or back to Ben Loon, who will do the same once playing from Philadelphia come and try to press. I don't think anybody wanted to be the guy who would make a mistake and will lose the ball and cause a Philadelphia goal. It's kind of a mental game, but in those first 10, 20 minutes, Philadelphia won that battle and basically dismantled whatever plan City had for the game.
Oh, they absolutely did. And the problem with the first 10 or 15 minutes was the sheer, not possession by Philadelphia, but the relentless attack by Philadelphia. And it was extra frustrating to see that start to the game when we knew Philadelphia was so shorthanded, missing
Hmm.
6 starters, having two players start for the first time at least in Hariel and Vasilev for the Union. They were not quite scraping the barrel because the Union are fairly deep, but this was a team that we did not expect to bring this for the veracity to. They were brave, and they were fearless, to borrow some Carnelisms, and
Yeah.
they kept City on their back foot. Olaf said post game that he felt that the team had space to work with, and that they chose those back passes. They chose to play the ball back instead of just moving the ball and moving the players in the right direction. But I don't know. I feel that's generous in what City was able to create space with, especially in the first half. Maybe it was the players playing with their back to goal so deep in St. Louis's own end, because you're getting Leuven and Durkin coming back to the ball. And it's not just Philadelphia sending numbers in their high press, but it's when St. Louis is receiving these passes in their attempts to progress the ball up, what they're ending up doing. And this has been a trend. And I titled this episode, at least of our stream, I don't know if I'm going to title the pod this way, Disturbing Trends in
Hmm.
the Attack. One of the disturbing trends in the buildup is that first touch, as we try to progress the ball into our central midfielders, they're not taking it in a half turn. They're taking it with their back to goal. And so their first look is to the back line, is to the keeper. And if they don't have any space, if they're immediately pressed to not have the opportunity to have the first touch and then have the second touch be their turn, that's where we're getting into trouble. And it seems like that's a basic first thing that is a huge problem for this team as we're trying to move the ball up from our center backs to our midfielders. Watch Edu Leuven, watch Chris Durkin. Their backs are entirely to goal, and there's no playing the ball into space. You can say that this is by intention and by design, is to play the ball to the player and not into space for the player to meet the ball, but it's not working for City. And that to me is something I've noticed consistently in these first few games as we attempt to progress the ball, especially using our midfielders, is they're not able to take the ball in stride in this half turn and try to move it to the wings or even progressively carry it themselves. And that may be a focal point of why the pressing teams are giving us so much trouble to start with. San Diego, and now Philadelphia, these teams that are the most egregious in their press, giving us, you might have space at first or space around you, but you don't have meaningful space to then turn and do something with the ball. And that's why you're relying on your center backs and your keeper to send the ball up, because that space is being taken away before you can have a second move, which is what our midfielders need to actually have a meaningful chance to progress the ball. It's positioning, but also I think there's an underlying problem in where the players are being kind of maybe instructed to pass the ball, how they're being instructed to play it to the midfielders. And I recall something in preseason where this was more, I have to dig it back up. I'm almost positive I heard Olaf say this in preseason about wanting the passes to go to the players and not into space for the players to find the ball. That and maybe I'm making too big of a deal and we need to look at the tape to confirm this, but that would, to me, answer the question of why Olaf felt we had space to work with, but we weren't still able to progress the ball against a pressing team.
Yeah, and you have to give credit to Philadelphia too, and yeah, you made a good point about the ball going to the player instead of finding the space. But when those balls were going to the players, like Philadelphia, there was a player from Philadelphia right there that will not let you make that turn or have a couple of seconds to think about where to go. And obviously, you go the easy way back to the center backs or back to Ben Lund. But one thing I like, and this was, I guess you can call it a bright spot, the 3 or 4 times that the team understood, okay, I need to make some quick touches, progress the ball, break the press. St. Louis was going to goal like really easy. In 3, 4 touches, he will be in Philadelphia's box. It's just that he couldn't finish the play and make a shot. But during the first half, after those 3, 4 saves that Ben Lund had, St. Louis found a period of 5 to 10 minutes where uh, it kind of understood, okay, I have to pull the ball on the ground instead of going long, and I can approach in 3, 4 touches and find the space. Like Philly with the 4 or 5 guys who were pressing high was leaving a lot of space in midfield, and City was able to break that 2 or 3 times, just not lucky to get the right shot or the right opportunity. But after that, it was again all Philadelphia.
And you're right, when they did have those opportunities to get the ball into the attacking midfield, the Marcel Hartle areas, when the wingers were pressed up higher, they did have more success, and it happened very quickly. Got multiple instances throughout the game in the first and especially in the second half, where you did get the ball up there and you started some runs. And we'll talk about those in a second. But I think the underlying problem to City is regularly being able to get the ball into those areas, not relying on the build that involves your center backs to send the ball long and hoping to win those duels as a way to create that. You need to have space that even give your center mids don't need a lot of time. Your center mids just need to figure out a better approach to progress the ball, a better first touch to have. And maybe it's how the center backs are playing the ball to the central midfielders. Maybe it's how to get the ball a little wider in your approach so that the wingers can be involved more, because once they received the ball, that first touch, it was game over in a lot of ways for the center mids, Leuven and Durkin. But on those instances when they did get the ball out to the wings and they were able to progress it past the press in St. Louis's defensive half, there was a lot of success because there was a ton of space. Bradley Carnell was very willing to leave that space open. And just like he did in St. Louis, he relied heavily on his center backs and his fullbacks to cut the lines down and to meet the ball in 1v1s. And he took that gamble, and in a lot of ways it paid off, just with how disruptive he was in St. Louis's defensive half. But let's go through a few things, because that first 10 or 15 minutes that Olaf really hammered on post game, that was all Philadelphia. The momentum swing was purely in the Union's direction. And they created so many throw-ins, they created corner kicks, and that's what led to the goal. The goal wasn't in the run of play. The goal was off that corner kick. And Ben Lund said post-game that I think he said that his vision was obstructed just by some of the players, and so he wasn't able to see it and make as quick of a first move as he would have liked. But that was the game changer. And when you when you allow the Union to dictate the beginning of the game and the flow of the game to that extent, you're opening yourself up to that possibility that if you give them a set piece opportunity, anything could happen, just like it did against the Sounders with St. Louis and that set piece opportunity that Leuven took advantage of. The Union just made it work. And you give Bradley Carnell's team, who he scored a ton of goals off set pieces, you give his team set piece opportunities over and over, they're going to make you pay. And they did. And St. Louis started off flat-footed. They didn't follow the game plan per Olaf in the first 10 or 15 minutes. That happened. But you are right that in the midst of Elvir, our assistant coach, getting a yellow card, St. Louis, which that highlights a lot of the frustration. St. Louis did have a bit more momentum in the middle part of that first half. I don't think they really ended the first half as they wanted to. But like 34 minutes, I noted Betcher had a really good opportunity, played up to Toyshirt for the shot after holding it defensively, quick passes into the final third. It was one of those sequences exactly as you described, where if you can get the ball past Philly's press, if you can get the ball into your attacking mids, into your forwards, then your direct to goal takes over. You're getting yourselves into 1v1 situations where you're on the attack and you have those opportunities. Toyshirt had the first opportunity there early in the first half, and it didn't amount to anything. But I think that if that type of thing had been able to be more consistently applied, and in the second half we saw more of it, but in the first half there was really only, I think, that one opportunity that I noticed that was even slightly meaningful or slightly dangerous. And otherwise it was just, from a St. Louis perspective, it was the Ben Lunt show in keeping us in this game after that corner kick.
Yeah, Ben Loon was the brightest spot, did a great job. And yeah, you mentioned the goal, like at least the goal wasn't in the run of play. But then if you put it the opposite way, set piece, St. Louis have been so strong defending set pieces, and this was the first one of the game. Yeah, I guess you could say they were caught flat footed, not ready. But it just looked like an easy goal for Philadelphia. And yeah, Ben Lund's vision was obstructed, but nobody. And maybe the wind also was a factor in the corner kick. But it just looks too easy for the Philadelphia defender to get to that ball and make the shot that was out of the way, out of reach for Ben Lund. But it just looked like a very easy play for Philadelphia at that point.
Given how the first half went, were you expecting second half subs in this one to start the second half?
Not to start the second half, but maybe earlier on the second half, which is something that Melbourne had not been afraid to do, and like when during the game, like early on the second half, like Leuven had been losing quite a few balls, and we were talking about, okay, maybe it's time for Morales to come into the game. The team needs more control of the ball, which when Morales has come in, he has done that very well. And then you end up delaying that substitution, and you could say that maybe because you delayed that sub, Edward Leuven ended up getting a red card, and then at that point you're down one man, and it's more difficult to find a space. Although at times I think City play better with 10 men.
They did show much more of a fire in the second half when they were down to 10 men. It seems a lot more sense of urgency, I would say. In the first half, I think the second half was I would say more of a low key half. The first half was definitely unleashed by Philadelphia, because in that first half, they had 15 shots to St. Louis's 2. They had 8 shots on target to St. Louis's 1. And obviously they had the goal. St. Louis had a lot more passing, even though Philadelphia, and I don't know if you noticed this, but I gotta address this: the differences in statistical bookkeeping across the multiple like websites.
Oh,
We
I was gonna
often,
ask you about that.
yeah, we often note here that there are differences in FOTMob, FBref, MLS, where Opta gives their information on the Apple broadcast. Apple even had, I think, 2 different versions of this, because at one point in the first half, they noted St. Louis had around 60% possession, and most other websites, including what MLS ended up publishing and Apple at halftime, noted Philadelphia's 60% possession. And at least the eye test for me, you have to give that nod to Philadelphia in the first half. And I think it did have to do with the inability for St. Louis to get the ball into the attacking half at all. Just had to address that statistical difference because we do, fall back on some of these other stats like shots on goal, expected goals on target, all that stuff. In the first half, there were a couple yellow cards notable. Obviously, Elvier, Kyle Hebert, Chris Durkin. Leuven picked up his first yellow at 55 minutes. And the one thing that we noticed, I think we talked about this before we went live, so let's talk about it now, is the referee seemed to forget that Edu Leuven was on a first yellow. Now, this is pure conjecture based on what the announcers mentioned it on Apple, but also the way that the ref approached Leuven.
Mm-hmm.
It was admittedly a boneheaded move. There's no way Edu Leuven's going to be proud of what he did in kicking the ball away, time wasting. In a bubble, yeah, it's yellow worthy. As a second yellow, highly debatable. And I think in other instances of this game, even the referee showed a little more grace to some of those players who were on yellow cards. Kyle Hebert, I think, was even shown some grace at one point later on.
Mm-hmm.
Just Chris Durkin was as well. So, and the way that the ref approached Edu Leuven in that moment, where he gave him the yellow and then almost seemingly looked at his book and said, "Oh yeah, you're already on a yellow. I guess I got to send you off." Pulled out his red. That's unfortunate. So bit of bad luck in that regard, but Leuven put himself in that scenario. So I'm not going to say it's the referee's fault, even if I'm frustrated with the lack of consistency that may have occurred on both sides and just forgetting maybe that Leuven was on a yellow already and how he would have otherwise approached it, the referee. So that was just a frustrating instance. But you're right. It has to be said that after Leuven's second yellow, the team generated more chances.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of formation changes, a lot of movement in the players when the subs came on. We're going to talk about in a second, but isn't that interesting how Edu Leuven is removed from the game? And I don't want to go too deep into this because I'm going to be trying to be careful with my words here because Edu Leuven is absolutely a vital piece to this team and has no doubt one of the highest ceilings on this team as an individual
Mm-hmm.
player. That said, he has shown a lot of frustrating tendencies this season in playing deeper in the field, in how he progresses the ball up at times, especially how he handles a press in getting the ball progressing the ball against a press. There has been a lot of run of play moments that are frustrating that may be glossed over by the fact that he scored a goal to win the game last week. When he was removed from this game, St. Louis tried a little bit of a different approach, getting the wings more involved and maybe almost bypassing progressing the ball through the central midfield. It also has to be said that in the second half, they were playing more with the wind instead of
Mm-hmm.
against the wind. So you never know how that might have played into the success of some of their long balls or the success of what they were trying to do. But that whole, perfect storm type situation, we did show a lot of danger when Leuven left.
Yeah, and I don't think it's much about Leuven. I think more Philadelphia also maybe they relax a little bit more, seeing that
Yeah,
they had an extra man and the press wasn't as intense as it was before that. But City definitely took advantage of it and more quick passes using the wings, created some good chances. But it was just wow, City is looking better with 10, regardless of who came out. I don't think it is about Leuven. It's just what the game gave you and what
yeah.
Philadelphia gave you, and City finally making more quick passes, putting the ball on the ground. That worked too. But again, created some good things, but couldn't finish. And in the end, it was just a frustrating game for City today.
Absolutely. And the subs were an interesting choice as well. That's got to be talked about, not only in their timing, but the choices of subs. You mentioned that potentially leaving Leuven on too long helped uh, inadvertently leaving him on the field, getting the red card when you otherwise might have subbed him off. First sub for St. Louis didn't occur until 71 minutes. By comparison, much later than Olaf had been wanting to use his subs, and he mentioned post game that he was going to sub Leuven off. That
See?
it's almost like salt in the wound at that point, where you're saying you had an idea to sub a player off, you don't get to it early enough, and so that player picks up a red card, and now everything kind of just goes to the dumpster in that regard. And after 5 minutes elapsed about from when Leuven got the red card to when the subs were made. And we'll never know if this was the original intent, making the subs the way they did. Morales came on, Yarrow came on, Klaus came on, all essentially like for like. And at this point, not a whole lot changed in the sense of where the positioning was that I could make. You had Klaus sub in up front for Betcher. You had Yarrow sub in on the right side for Hebert, and then Morales took that midfield spot for Durkin. So you were kind of operating a little bit. Wallem eventually folded in, and especially after Salio subbed in for Cedric Toyshirt at 74, which was great to see. I noted on social media that I'm sure the fans all across the St. Louis area were loving Salio getting more of a time in. Unfortunately, it didn't amount to anything, but what we ended up seeing is a pretty significant formation change after Salio came on, especially highlighting the versatility of Conrad Wallem, moving over into more of a right midfield role or a central midfield on the right side role, at least. That, you had Akil Watts still on that right wing, right backside. And then you had more of Giannis Horn taking a left back spot. But it didn't really generate much, at least dangerous opportunities. You had more ball movement into the final third. I don't know if necessarily Salio is attributable to that. I thought Giannis Horn played really well as he was getting a little bit more involved in the attack in the later parts of the second half. You had Alfredo Morales was doing a really good job in controlling the midfield in my book. And then Marcel Hartl, who runs more than anybody on the field, was getting just more involved in where the ball was. And I liked some of the interplay. We saw Horn to Hartl late on, that Hartl had a shot long. Giannis Horn had a shot or two from range. But you saw some desperation in the second half by City and taking some of those really long shots. And in the second half, they had 3 shots basically from range, nothing up close. So we're talking about more opportunities. We're still not talking about anything more than 0.09 XG cumulatively from 3 shots. And that's pretty abysmal when it comes down to it. So there's not a whole lot that worked in the second half is what I guess I'm getting at, even with some of those subs. And it's disheartening when you know the quality that the Union had and what they were lacking that this side was able to beat. So while some of my takeaways are defensively, we withstood, I guess maybe a better term than we looked strong, because we allowed far too many shots. You cannot allow 18 shots from a Union side that's missing 6 of their best players, 5 of their best field starters. And it's just an overall poor performance, the ability to control the flow of play, the ability to dictate anything when field wise, you should have had the talent advantage.
Yeah, for sure. Philadelphia shorthanded, missing even their goalkeeper. Their backup goalie was their first MLS start, and
Yeah.
City didn't do enough to test that young goalie. But yeah, my main takeaway is very imprecise on the passes. A lot of bad passes, losing a lot of second balls, and just not understanding that with the wind, what the team needed was to pull the ball on the ground, and a lot of that was dictated by Philadelphia pressing and not letting the center backs play it off the back. But I think that's something that was known based on how Carnell likes to play.
Nothing was surprising in this game, though. That's the
Hmm.
frustrating thing, is Bradley Carnell came out doing exactly what we knew he was going to do.
Hmm.
And Olaf didn't have an answer to it. He came out and it was like we knew what they were going to do, but they couldn't play through it. They couldn't play around it. Olaf's talked in the past about quality of the players not being there to possess how much he wants to. And we're still seeing these 35-40% possession games where we're not able to keep control of the ball in any meaningful way to either incrementally move it up the field or to get it into the final third and then do anything but take a shot once you get there. Because with this City team, it's obvious that they want to build up from the back, but once they get it into the attacking half, they still want to be on the break. They still want to have a more direct to goal approach and create transition. So almost forcing yourself to draw in the defense, bypass them, and then create transition moments. But you're not able to have success in drawing a good high pressing team in, or drawing a high pressing team in where they're sending a good amount of numbers into your defensive half, and getting around them. That's the part that everything else hinges upon, and it is falling apart completely. So that's one of the most frustrating takeaways we have here. But the stat of the game that I think I have, and even though we're doing this post game, even though we're doing this with these knee jerk reactions, we do have some stats thanks to our friend MLS Stat on Blue Sky. The average height of defensive action, Santi. This has been notable, and now we have averages to go off of after 5 matches. City has been, and this number, the average height of defensive actions, looks at the part of the field relative to your keeper that you engage on average the ball via clearances, challenges, interceptions, recoveries, block passes, or tackles. It's your line of engagement. Our average height of defensive actions was 30.79 meters, which puts
Oh,
you just beyond, I mean, not even 2 times the 18-yard box in our defensive half. That is one of the lowest, if not the lowest lines for City of the entire season. And we have had such a low line of engagement this season, much different than we had in the previous 2 years. Philadelphia, on the other hand, average height of defensive action, 49.65 meters near
oh my God.
midfield. They
Yeah.
were engaging us near midfield when we were engaging them near our own penalty area. And the difference of about 20 meters is the biggest difference that we've had all season. It might be the biggest difference we've ever had as a club. I think it is the biggest difference we've ever had where we have been on essentially the receiving side.
Yeah,
It's a and it lines up with the eye test, right? It's just a poor performance in where you're engaging the ball. But this could be overcome if you had a plan to engage where you are and then get the ball into more dangerous areas. We just don't have the quality, we don't have the plan, and we definitely don't have the success so far.
yeah, that's the story of the game. You can tell it with that stat. The ball was most of the time on City's end of the field, and City just couldn't break enough to get on Philadelphia's end of the field. Did it a few times, but just not enough. And Bradley Carnell won the coaching battle today. This is something that the team is going to study, look at the video, look at what it did. But yeah, definitely that trend of low possession and low average height of defensive actions is something that to look for. This week, the team is going to have an extra day with the next game being on a Sunday, and hopefully Melberg and the coaching staff will take a good look and work on what needs to be improved for the team to get a better control of the ball and to not lose so many second balls.
Yeah, we have the luxury even post game to look at a couple of Olaf Melberg's comments, and I mentioned some of them in stride during our conversation. One of his comments was interesting about opening up the game more in the second half, and he did say we obviously have a plan for if we go down a man. And he said, "I felt really confident in the formation change. I thought we did really well in that. We had players in good positions, and I think now we had a little bit of momentum. The guys did really well. They had confident play. The energy level was a little bit higher." But also we have to learn from that. We have to start games like that. And this was a theme for Olaf is starting the game better. There was clearly a failure from the get-go, clearly a failure in the players that he had in that starting 11 and what they were able to do, whether it was game planning, and it didn't sound like he wanted to take credit for the game planning being a mistake, because he talked about really disappointed with the start. Quote, we don't do the things we agreed upon. And I mentioned that
Mm.
at the beginning, but that is noteworthy in how disappointed he seems in the players' implementation of what he wanted them to do. So I don't doubt that that's going to be a focus in training of dictating and sticking to what you intend to be doing. Likely they knew exactly. I mean, we're sitting here playing Monday morning quarterback right at the end of this, and
Yeah,
they know what Bradley Carnell does as well. They knew what he was going to come out of the gates with. So it was just a failure to perform. It was a failure to do what they talked about, what they worked on, and it now they're gonna have to play without Edu Leuven against Austin next week. They're going into this with a little bit of a deflated sense and trying to look to bounce back at home in an important match against a conference rival again, that they need these 3 points at home more than just about anything, and they have to figure out a way to score goals. They didn't have anything that the Klaus and Pompeu subs created. They didn't generate enough, and now they're going to have to figure out if there's a better way to do that without Eddie Leuven in the lineup, without Thomas Totland still. So will Akil Watts continue to be that option at right wing back? Because I didn't see a ton that excited me in that regard. I kind of want to see, at this point, switch it up, see what Wallem might have to offer on that right side. If Olaf was excited about or thought he saw some exciting things in the second half of the formation change where he moved Wallem more to the right side, maybe do a little bit more of that. There's a lot that I think needs to be addressed this week as they look into next week, because they can't take the same performance into game after game and expect to get anything out of it. Uh-oh, Santi, did I lose you? Santi, are you back?
I'm back. Yeah, sorry,
Well,
uh, my
this
connection was bad.
nope. It's I think it was also me. So that's
Hey, now
probably our
people
cue
are
to
worried
wrap it up.
about you.
Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I don't think we need to be worried about me getting kidnapped, though. There have been a few um, glances, so you never know. I have absolutely no idea where we cut off. It's going to be a hoot to edit this one. Um, let's wrap it up, though, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, you were just talking about at least the last I remember the team playing without Leuven next week.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see what happens when I pick this up. And without Eddie Leuven next week, the team's going to have to figure out a different approach, not only to progressing the ball. Alfredo Morales seems like the most obvious candidate to take that central midfield role, but beyond that, just a different approach in general. They've done a good job defensively, still managing to hold the Philadelphia Union 18 shots, no goals in the run of play. But you can't continue to have this offensive performance game after game and hope to just get lucky a couple of games. The Austin FC team we're going to play doesn't press like the Union, like San Diego did, but there's plenty to work on in training and plenty that just I don't know if you need to go back to the drawing board. I don't know if you need to change the formation in some certain way. All we have to know, honestly, Santi, is what we've seen and heard from Olaf. So far, there's been no desire to move away from three center backs.
Mm-hmm.
So far, there's been no desire to see Klaus have a consistent role, Salio have a consistent role, and there's been no overt success consistently offensively. So, do you take this opportunity against Austin with an extra day of practice of training because the game's on a Sunday? Do you take that time to give Salio a go? Because he was scoring some bangers in training that we saw this past week. The fans want to see more Salio Pompeu. They want to see him stretch the lines, whether you put him in as a striker or a wing back. Olaf has not shown a propensity to play Salio as a wingback. He has not shown a propensity to get Ostrak in at that position. So you're looking likely at a roster at a starting 11 that's not going to change drastically, but I think you need to at least expect and start to get better quality out of your players, or some of these players just need to stop seeing so much time. You have a little bit of depth, and you're going to have to start using it at least to light a fire under some of these players.
Well, the one thing to also keep an eye on this week, and I'm not sure if Melberg said anything about that during the press conference, but when Toychar came out, it looked like he was like he had a knock or something, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate because you had just subbed Klaus for Becher, and then Toychar went out. It looked like he had a slight injury or something, so it will be interesting to see if he will be available. But yeah, I would like to see some change in the offense. Celio to have a chance. Obviously, he came in today, but very few balls came his direction, and at times it looked like him and Hartel were on the same space. So something needs to change for the offense to get that spark, and the fact that Austin doesn't press as some of the teams City has played maybe will be good, but hopefully the team can figure out the formation and we can see some of these players who haven't had many minutes.
That's also got to be a takeaway is we continue to struggle against the press. We have to figure out a way to beat that, because we can't just say we're going to succeed against teams that don't press and we're going to lose every single game or draw every single game that a team presses. Sooner or later, that's going to bite us, and teams are going to start catching on and start pressing when they don't usually press.
Yeah.
But while you still have that at your disposal, you can expect a different type of a matchup. I do wonder that's a good thing to watch out for is Cedric Toyshirt going out at 74 for Salio. Was that, it didn't seem like it was prescribed. Cedric went out with a little bit of a knock. So we're going to have to watch that to see if that is, and see how he comes back to training this week, or if he does, when he does. But it didn't seem like Salio was intended to play in that position at that moment. That's noteworthy, I suppose, when in the context of fans wanting to see more Salio. That said, Santi, next week we do play Austin FC on that extended supersized fan day next Sunday in the doubleheader. 1:15 kickoff against Austin FC, and then there's the City 2 match later that afternoon. Going into, I guess, the late night games, since we're doing this post game, but also going into just the Sunday matches. St. Louis not doing terribly in the standings. We're not going to take a huge drop, I bet. We're probably still going to end up, we're still on 8 points. We're probably going to end up around the middle of the table in the playoff contention. But the takeaway here isn't where we are in the standings. The takeaway is we have to find a way to fix the attack, fix the ball progression, fix the amount of pressure that we put on the opposition, and just take some pressure off of our defense, take some pressure off of our goalkeeper, and allow them to not do as much work. One other thing that's noteworthy, Santi, and I don't know if this is going to gain steam or traction. There was a report from the, I want to make sure I get this outlet correct. There was a report from the Philadelphia Soccer Now account on Blue Sky that says Bradley Carnell was just physically confronted by St. Louis striker Joao Klaus following the final whistle. The report
What?
the report from the Philadelphia Soccer Now account says Carnell had just completed handshakes with St. Louis technical staff before Klaus arrived and gave him a bump and a few words.
Oh, wow.
There's If there's video of that and it surfaces, that's going to be interesting. That's just I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of conjecture, a lot of speculation that I'm not going to get into or really entertain
Yeah.
when it comes to Klaus and Carnell and their relationship. But that was seen and it had been reported on. So I felt that was important that we at least mention or address, as it's probably going to be talked about a little bit more. But Philadelphia Soccer Now on Blue Sky had that report. Beyond that, the Bradley Carnell and Indiana Vassilev won this battle. We'll see. Maybe these two teams can meet each other in a different setting later on down the line. But you got to tip your hat to the way Carnell coached his team and hope that Olaf can get better out of St. Louis going forward.
Yeah, it'll be a long week, and yeah, depending on what happens with this Klaus rumor, City could be without Klaus too for the next game if there is a suspension after the fact. But yeah, lots to work on. It's good when it's your first loss of the season, still early in the season, and
Yeah.
then an Austin team that has also not done very well this season, hasn't scored a lot of goals. All their games have been 1-0, either a win or a loss. But it's a good opportunity to bounce back on Sunday.
That's right. We'll be back to a little more normalcy with our live stream on Thursday night this coming week. No midweek show this week as I'm still enjoying spring break. So thank you for joining us here on Flyover Fallout to look post-game special, look at St. Louis City's 1-0 loss to the Philadelphia Union. We appreciate you joining us. We appreciate you listening. If you download this on the podcast later, Santi, thanks for your time after calling the game, and we will catch you later, everybody. Be a goldfish with this one. Have short memories, and let's look for better from Olaf and company next week.
Vamos City!
All right. Thanks for sticking with us through the technical issues. I promise I didn't get kidnapped. So, yeah. I wish we had a better one to do our post-game show. I wish we were more exciting, but, it is what it is. Santi, thanks for joining me on this one. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.